And Russian forces have attacked several cities this weekend. Despite the strikes, President Volodymyr Zelensky announced U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin will visit Ukraine on Sunday. He thanked the U.S. and other nations who have provided military support, but he called this a very different kind of war. I want to bring in now retired U.S. Army Colonel David Johnson to talk more about the military response in Ukraine. He's a principal researcher at the RAND Corporation and an adjunct scholar at the Modern War Institute at West Point. Welcome, Colonel Johnson. It's good to have you here. So tell us, how significant is this new batch of weaponry that the U.S. is sending to Ukraine?
Well, thanks for having me. I think it's very significant. When you look at what we're sending, one of the key, I think one of the key weapon systems is more artillery. There's a sense right now in the West as we watch this that the javelins and switchblades and everything else have dominated the battlefield. There's a new report up from the RUSI, the think tank in England, that essentially says the senior commander of the Ukrainian forces said these anti-tank missiles slowed the Russians down, but what killed them was artillery. So I think those weapons getting there in any kind of numbers with the stockpile of munitions is critical.
Colonel, do you think that equipment is enough, or does Ukraine need at this point direct military intervention from other countries to fend off Russia, or is there even something in between those two options that the international community that stands with Ukraine ought to be doing?
Well, I think this is one of those, cases that is very unsatisfying if the answer is we have to wait and see. We need to continue to supply the Ukrainians with as much as we can of what they need, make sure that supply chain is in fact robust and continuous. But I don't think, my sense is there's no need at this juncture for direct intervention.
But is there something more that ought to be done beyond just the supplying of the types of weapons that we've been supplying at this point? There have been some discussions about a more advanced weaponry that President Volodymyr Zelensky has been asking for, and the United States has been hesitant to provide for fears that it would escalate tensions with Russia.
So my sense is, the only thing that's been kind of held back were fighter aircraft. Mm-hmm. And that was principally because they would have to be flown out of NATO bases into the Ukraine. But there's talk of that an agreement between various former Warsaw Pact countries that are NATO now to supply those systems. We know that they're getting S-300 air defense systems from, I think, the Czech Republic. So these are very sophisticated weapon systems that are getting there. Javelin and Switchblade are small, individually fired systems, but they're extremely sophisticated. They're just, Switchblade is just now being fielded in our forces. So I think we are giving them the best of what we have. Mm-hmm. What they need, quite frankly, is mass. A few hundred Switchblades will do nothing compared to thousands of artillery rounds. Mm-hmm.
At what rate would the mass that you're describing need to get to Ukraine so that their military can hold on to particularly key cities in the West?
Right. So I think, this is a correlation of forces issue, which is a military speak for having enough to do what you need to do mm-hmm. Against an adversary. So I think if we keep supplying at a rate that, surpasses the attrition that the Ukrainians have suffered, it'll be sufficient. I think the defender has enormous advantages in every military exercise since Thermopylae. Everybody's always talked, you need 3 attackers to defeat 1 defender. I think that number is actually different in this case, given that the Ukrainians have shown that they're much better trained, surely much more motivated and competent than the Russians are facing. So I think as long as they can keep, attriting, which, is a horrible word that means killing more Russians than, enable the Russians to do what they need to do, I think they'll keep hanging in there.
Colonel, I can't help but notice all of the tanks that are in the background of your shot there. And we've seen so many photos of destroyed or abandoned Russian tanks that are littering Ukraine. I'm wondering, what about the design of those tanks is making them so vulnerable? And are they still useful in modern wars like this one?
So the reason all these tanks are here and the airplanes that are hanging from the ceilings is my dissertation was called Fast Tanks and Heavy Bombers, about the development of armor and aviation in the interwar period between World War I and World War II. And what I found is you can't, talk to people and explain characteristics. You have to show them something, a model or whatever. So I think I wrote an article recently in War on the Rocks about the death of the tank. I think it's premature. I think this same discussion happened after the first Arab-Israeli war, after the Yom Kippur War, after Lebanon in 2006, where the anti-tank guided missile is going to rule the battlefield. What we found in every one of those cases is that there were technical improvements that could be made. In the case of after the early war, better armor, after Lebanon, active protection, which is what we're putting on our tanks, trophy. But the key to this is not just technical, it's tactical, which means making your soldiers understand what they have to do to prevail in an environment with these kinds of weapons. And that means very integrated air, ground, fire, and maneuver. Artillery suppresses where these anti-tank gunners might be, and they're very vulnerable because they're not under armor. They're running around with these individual weapons. Maneuver takes advantage of that. Infantry goes out and clears where those gunners were. What the Russians are doing is just rolling down the road without any suppression that's noticeable and without any use of infantry. So it's not surprising that they're having a really difficult time. I did a book on the war in Lebanon and Gaza called Hard Fighting. The Israelis had exactly the same problem. They've forgotten how to do fire maneuver and basic battle drills for their tank crews.
And being a lecturer and professor at West Point, it's pretty well known that you can have all the equipment that you want. If you don't have a sound strategy and tactical guidance heading into a conflict, it doesn't make any sense at all. All right, retired Colonel David Johnson, thank you so much.
Hey, thank you so much. Appreciate you having me on.